Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
They bring the double at Booker. Book on the spin, fires for the win!
Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rushed by George defensively. Booker waiting with it. He's way out on the perimeter now. Booker lobs it for Ayton. Ayton looks, goes over to Rubio. Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubac. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot!
Booker!
And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a former podcast about the Phoenix Suns and the NBA. My name is Max McCauley, and I'm joined for the first time in far too long by my friend David Nash. David, it's been a little while, but I don't think anything's really happened since the last time we recorded, has it?
No, I think we should take credit. You know, we cancelled the podcast and the Suns went on to win 8 games in a row, which is not something they did or even came close to doing while we had the regular 7 Seconds or Less podcast, as you said, now former. But we're back because, you know, that was just way too much fun. And, you know, we always love jumping on and talking about the Suns, particularly when they're fun, Max. So let's take a little bit of credit, and I'm excited to talk about the bubble run, I suppose.
So can we take credit for what happened with the Suns and not take credit for everything else that happened since we stopped recording?
Yes, that was a total coincidence and kind of nice timing on our end, I suppose, because it would have been pretty depressing to go through that and have to still record podcast episodes. So, we won't take credit for that one.
Yeah, I didn't want to do what Nate Duncan did and turn it into like a COVID podcast. So we did not need to do that. But anyway, yeah, like David said, the Suns have been good lately, so we decided we want to jump on here for a one-timer. We're not bringing the podcast back. We don't want to get hopes up or anything, but you know, as long as the Suns keep going 8-0 in stretches, we'll have a podcast every 8-0 stretch. How about that, David?
Yeah, I did have a note down here to make sure that we pointed out, which I'll definitely do in the text of the newsletter as well. But yeah, this isn't a full-blown return. This is just two buddies jumping on to talk about a really fun stretch of games, and I'm really excited to get into it, Max.
All right, well, we're going to do all the old segments today, so listeners should remember the first one was the recap. So, David, let's do what I'm expecting to be our best, most fun recap ever.
I'm not sure there was ever, again, something even close to this in our podcast history, Max, but Phoenix won their first 3 scrimmages, and then we went on to the real stuff, and obviously Washington first up, 125 to 112. DeAndre Ayton had 24 points in that one. Then there was the 117 to 115 win over Dallas, where Rubio had 20 and 9. 117, 115 again over the Clippers, where DeAndre Ayton again had 19 and 7. 114 to 99 over Indiana to go 4 and 0. Ayton again, 23 and 10 rebounds. 119, 112 win over Miami. Javon Carter popped up there with 20 points, Max. 128 to 101 over the Oklahoma City Thunder for our 6th win in a row, and Cam and Mikal both had 18 points each in that one. Then the 130 to 117 win over Philadelphia, where Mikal again had 24. And finally, the weird game at the end I found, but they went 8-0, Max, 128 to 102 over Dallas, and Dario Saric had 16 in that one. And I'm sure you will have noticed, and everyone listening will have noticed, that I didn't mention Devin Booker in that recap, and that's because if I went with the actual top scorer in all 8 games, it would have just been 8 times for Booker repeated. So that's why I didn't do that, Max. But I thought I'd throw a quick question your way straight off the top. If we take out the Clippers game and that buzzer beater, which was clearly the defining moment, at least for me, of the 8 games, what was your favorite non-Clippers game, and maybe kind of your favorite moment other than that buzzer beater as well, Max?
Before I get to that, and I can't wait to get to that because I have an answer that I feel strongly about. When you mentioned the Washington game, I realized I can't remember a single thing from that game. Like, not one thing that happens.
It was a slow move into the bubble. I think it was just a sense of relief that we got over that one in the end, by the end of that game, Max.
Yeah, I remember it being disappointing, kind of, but like, okay, we won, so that's cool. But yeah, I don't remember any moments from it. That was 2 weeks ago or whatever. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
But my answer is it's in the Indiana game, David, and it's a specific moment in the Indiana game. It's so midway through the third quarter, Booker gets 5 fouls, right? And he'd been in foul trouble against Dallas too. It was an early thing that thankfully he kicked towards the end of the bubble. But so he gets the 5 fouls. We had blown a lead. We're only up by 1 at the point. And it kind of felt like, all right, well, we had that cool win over the Clippers. We've been doing great so far, but, time to set back to reality. The Phoenix Suns aren't actually going to, win all their games here. So, we're going to have a loss. But then the bench thing happened again. It happened in the Dallas game, and it happened again. And I think it was Campaign hit a couple huge shots.
Yep.
I think there was a couple other guys involved, obviously, but, Sarge was huge. That was the moment when I thought, David, I was like, this is real. This is we actually are good, and maybe we'll make a real run out of this.
It's a great point, and I know you've been super, super busy with work, so I highly doubt you've managed to get to my latest newsletter that talks and raves and gushes over Devin Booker, but
soon. David, it's the only thing I read anymore about sports. So there you go.
I just think it's funny. I think it was always the funniest thing about us doing this podcast. We always seem to match up on things when we very rarely talked about them before we went into the podcast. And when I was writing that newsletter, I said the exact same thing about that Indiana win. I thought we got to the end of that game, we were 4-0, and that was the first time that I ever believed that we were maybe going to be able to go on this extraordinary run. Up until that point, I was just waiting for the Phoenix Suns of old moment to happen, and definitely through that game it felt like this was it. Like, we just weren't going to be able to get over that hump with everything that was going on in that game. And yeah, I think that's a great game to pick out right in the middle there, and it was kind of the defining moment because we knew there was going to be a few weakened teams coming up after that. That just felt like the one that they had to get over the hump, and they found a way, and it was a 15-point win in the end, which, funny thing going over these games, not a lot of close ones, Max, after those first couple.
Thank God, because the first couple were excruciating. I think the Clippers game wasn't excruciating. That was kind of just fun the whole time.
Yeah.
But the Dallas game was excruciating, no doubt. That game was tough. The other moment I want to give as a kind of honorable mention here is just the first half of the Dallas Suns finale. Because we just kicked the doors off them. That was not ever competitive. We killed them. And that was just fun to feel. Obviously we cared. They didn't care. But still, sometimes in situations, the team that cares doesn't quite do as well as you expect. And the Suns couldn't have done better. They really, really kicked Dallas' ass.
Yeah, that was just kind of, I guess, an encore of sorts to everything that they did, because Dallas clearly weren't, fully mentally in the game, but that can be a bit dangerous sometimes, and we had a few teams like that in that 8-stretch run where they're just playing loose, like OKC was another one. But shout out to Eddie Johnson. I thought his commentary over the 8 games was actually pretty good, and at the start of that Dallas game, he was harping on that of kind of, you've got a real chance to essentially sit Luka Doncic here if you come out and just blow the doors off, as you said. And that's exactly what they did. Dallas just didn't want any part of that game after halftime because of how hard the Suns were playing and how well they were executing.
Yeah, they were excellent. And that's something and this is something you like to specialize in, David, the X's and O's a little more than I do, the tactics on the court. I thought the offense was just so well called during these 8 games. And I remember there was one inbounds play, I think it was in that game, where they totally feigned an inbounds towards the half court, and then had it go to 8, and 8 immediately just drops it back over. I think it was Cam Johnson. It was just beautiful. It totally faked out whichever team it was. I think it was Dallas, but I don't know if you remember that play. But what do you think just generally about how the offense was called? Yeah,
I'm glad you had that, because I had a note to make sure we didn't get to the very end of the podcast and didn't touch on Monty Williams, because I thought, we're going to focus on the players here and it could easily go by very quickly. He just had them humming for this. He was just perfect. I don't know if you've got a chance to see that end of game.
Oh yeah.
What would you call it? I guess, motivation speech to the guys. And, I kind of commented he may as well have been staring down the camera at the rest of us, particularly when he pointed at Devin Booker and said, "You've been through a lot."
That was a real moment. That was a real moment, David.
Oh, 100%. And I reckon there was even a moment in that where he almost teared up himself. He's just a real great human being, which, we commented on. And this is a great, point by you to raise this. We commented that he was always going to be great from that perspective. Yep. We never had any doubts. But, his previous head coaching experience, I think there were some doubts around his on-court coaching and being a little bit too old school. And I remember we kind of made sure we touched on it in patches throughout podcast episodes, because it did look like he was, updating and upgrading. And you're right. I think they had continuity with a lot of sets that they were running from earlier in the season, but he'd also added in a few things. I think I saw a comment from the Sacramento Kings that they were shocked at how much teams were ready for them in the first few games, and it's like, how could you not be ready? Like, teams have had 4 months kind of knowing who they were going to play. Of course they're going to go back through tape and scout if they really need to win games. And I guess
not Luke Walton.
Yeah, exactly. And Vlade Divac has just bit the dust. But yeah, I think the Suns did that. And I think they knew that teams were going to do that to them as well. And that was the big thing for me from these 8 games. A lot of those sets that I've kind of highlighted more recently, the Suns had built in a lot of counters. And Devin Booker specifically knew if a team started defending set plays a certain way, he knew what his next read and the next read after that was. And they were just humming on all cylinders. And I can't speak highly enough of how Monty had them prepared. And I think he even gave a shout out to Willie Green in the last week or so for the offense specifically, and kind of shouting back to his Golden State Warriors days. So yeah, shout out to those two guys specifically, because I think the whole coaching staff just had this team ready to play like a World Cup or like a March Madness style tournament where they just had to take a game at a time and keep picking up the W's, Max.
Yeah, 100%. I love you bringing up the clicking on all cylinders point. And so I guess before we get into specific players, I'll kind of give a compliment to the players as a whole. Mm-hmm. Everyone just kind of had their role and felt it and believed in it and didn't try to outstep it, It really felt like a cohesive team where everyone knew what their job was. And that's something the Suns have very rarely had in recent past. Even when they've had stretches of kind of greatness, it always kind of half-hazard skelters. Like you'd just be like Devin Booker going crazy, or other players kind of shooting more than you expect. Even kind of early in the season when we had the other kind of fun run, like Baines and such. Like Baines was like the MVP candidate. That was insane. That was not going to continue. But this really just felt like a real team, a team that knew what its purpose was, knew its identity, and just came out and played the same way every single game. It's the most consistency we've ever seen from this team since Steve Nash left the team. So, I think that's a great point that you bring up. The overall cohesiveness is a really important thing.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. It's going to come up a couple of times in players that we talk about, just kind of sticking to their role and maybe being a reason why we didn't see more from a couple of guys in particular as well. But yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Even I think to a guy like Kelly Oubre, who was clearly very unlikely to play, particularly if the Suns didn't progress, and we all know what their chances of progressing were in the end. So the fact that he went along for the whole time and was cheering the team on, Aaron Baines finally gets his 2 negative tests from COVID when the 8 games, I believe, had already started, and he still makes his way to Orlando and goes with the team. So you speak to those guys, and then I think your point before is what dovetails really perfectly into why you hope a coach like Monty can get the team buying in. You have a game like Indiana where Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton both get in foul trouble, and the bench steps up. And that's because you've shown the faith in them. And I think, again, 2 Eddie Johnson references very early in the podcast, but he mentioned that about the fact that a guy like Cam Payne, you've got to let him make a couple of mistakes because you've got to, let him have a little bit of belief in himself and let him believe that the coach believes in him as well. So then when that moment comes and he's called on, he can actually execute. And I think that was just huge from a whole team perspective. So yeah, I think before we get into individuals, definitely worth highlighting just the collective that they all bought in to this, little tournament of sorts. And I fell for the trap, felt like early on, particularly before the minor details were all kind of reported, I felt like it was, had the potential to be a waste of time. And it certainly did, even with the 8 games, if they dropped, say, that first one to Washington and heads started to drop. But, credit to them. They didn't go in with that mindset and they kind of just executed from the outset. And, they got the results. And so often we spoke about it, Max, you need results sometimes as a coach to really drive home what you're trying to teach. I think that was the biggest disappointment from the Igor season for me, is I could see what he was trying to do. He just didn't have the personnel to do it, and you were always going to lose the players in a 19-win season if they didn't see, what the positive results could be out of what you're trying to teach. And it's just such a great feeling to feel like they can end this season on this note, and is probably the glass half full kind of approach, because at least they didn't go to a play-in and it'd be everyone or someone's fault that they lost the game, or they didn't go to the playoffs and get swept and have things fall apart. So if there's one positive to going 8-0 and still not going any further, Max, I think they can finish on a high, and there's no finger pointing, and everyone was a collective, and it's all positive.
I'm so mad you stole that point from me, David.
Oh shit!
I really wanted to bring that up at some point where I think listen, obviously we all wanted them to make the play in and make the playoffs. That'd be so fun. But I do think we're going to look more fondly upon this team because of what happened than if they would have made the play-in game and lost, or made the playoffs and lost even.
100%.
I really do. So that part's kind of fun. I mean, obviously we all wanted Caris LeVert shot to go in last night. I don't really want to get into that too much because it's heartbreaking, I guess. But other than that, maybe we should get on to the individual players, David. So we're going to do our thing we did the whole season, and that's the 5-star rating, where we're going to rate each player. We used to by week, but we're going to do the whole bubble this time, David.
Yep.
Number 5 is going to be the best player of the bubble. Number 1 is going to be the worst of the 5 players we list. But man, this is going to be the most crowded 5-star thing we've ever done, David.
During the season, it was really hard for the opposite reason. Sometimes it was really hard to find a 2-star or 1-star on particular weeks, Max, because we had a few weeks there where we didn't even win a game, and it was hard to pick the best 5 players. This was really hard from the other perspective. There's going to be some honourable mentions that we'll still talk about later in the pod, but I just couldn't quite squeeze into my top 5, and that's going to be really interesting to see how we differ on these things. But I would be very surprised if we differ on the Top Gun here with 5 stars right off the bat here, Max, but I'll let you kind of throw to that first.
Totally agree. No way we disagree that Frank Kaminsky was the best player of the bubble. He's probably the only guy we're not going to talk about today, so I just wanted to bring his name up real quick. I think number 5, it's probably going to have to be Devin Booker, David. Arguably the MVP of the whole bubble. It's ultimately going to go to Damian Lillard, and honestly probably should go to Damian Lillard, but man, Devin Booker was so damn good, and if Phoenix had made the playoffs, he probably gets it. Just every single game he was great, and that was something that I was looking for. That's what you always want to see in a star player, is does he bring it in every single game? Is he helping you significantly in every single game? And Devin Booker was that in spades. As you said, if you would have listed the top scorer actually in every game, it would have been him over and over and over.
Yep.
And he did it efficiently. I believe he finished with like a 62% true shooting, 62.7. Just looked at it, which is incredibly great. On 30.5 points, it's amazing. It's about as efficient as you can get on that workload. The passing was fantastic. The crotch court passing was unbelievable. There were times on the court where he looked like LeBron or Luka the way he was seeing things.
Yep.
I mean, it's really hard. And then obviously in the clutch, he was fantastic. I think his overall finish was like 75% shooting in the clutch in the bubble.
Exactly.
Obviously,
yep.
the 2 shots against the Clippers were unbelievable. The game winner was stupid, and then the one before that was great too. David, there's really, I don't have a single negative word to say about Devin Booker in the bubble.
I wanted to give you the floor if you didn't take it straight off the top there, because, I gushed enough in my latest newsletter about him, and you hit on all the points that, I would have spoken on anyway. 50, 31, 94 in terms of his splits, 30.5 points per game, which was a 4-point leap compared to his regular season stats. Maintained his 6 assists a game, while I should say limiting his turnovers by almost 1 a game compared to the rest of the regular season, which happened on a increase of around 4% to his overall usage, Max, which is just huge, that he kind of maintained everything that he was doing, and things either stabilized or stayed static, or they actually improved from an efficiency standpoint, which is just ridiculous. It's you can't speak highly enough of it, and I think you touched on it there. I think I said it in my conclusion, I suppose, when I was writing about him, is I think the one thing that will stick with me longer term about these 8 games is he just found the perfect balance between when his team needed him to score a bucket and when he could defer and trust in his teammates.
Yes.
And I think that will be etched in my mind forever going forward, following Devin Booker for as long as he's in a Phoenix uniform, because I think that, we'll look back on that at that being the defining moment as he, starts to do that more and more in the following seasons, hopefully with the Phoenix Suns. That's definitely going to be the thing that I remember. You said hard to find a negative. I guess if you were going to find one, by the end, his 3-point shooting dropped down to 31%, when we're all kind of hoping that was going to trend up. But, how do you nitpick like that when everything else that he did was, vastly improved on what he was doing in the regular season, which we should note was already very, very good up until they went to Orlando, Max.
Yeah, and I want to get to the 3-point shooting thing in a second, but that was such a good point you just made about him finding the right times to defer and to take over the game. That is something we've been talking about on this podcast for a while, is that was kind of a weakness with him, or something that he wasn't always comfortable doing. But you're totally right. In this bubble, he hit all the notes on that. He was in so much more control of himself than he's ever been on the basketball court. I would say, other than the fouling on defense.
Yeah,
that was a lot of
little
control.
Little over ego in a few moments there.
Yeah, but even that got better, right? I mean, he also played pretty decent defense, and as you pointed out on Twitter, like, that was part of it for sure. He was fouling some because he was trying a little harder on defense. Some of it was just dumb fouls. It was a combination of the two.
Yeah.
But I guess that would be a nitpick. And then I want to get to the 3-point shooting. Yeah, you would like to see it go in more, obviously. But he, as he usually does, he still had his moments of greatness shooting threes, right? Clippers game was unbelievable. He was hitting insane threes in that game.
Yep.
There was one setback in Kawhi's face that was just mind-blowing. And then he had the 3 against, was it OKC or Philly, the one he shot from the half court?
OKC, yep.
OKC, yeah. Well, that was just ridiculous. So, and then Damian Lillard had a one-up him in the game against Brooklyn last night. What was that shot, David?
Oh, man, that was just, ridiculous. I think there was still 6 or 7 minutes to go, which, you can have the freedom to shoot that a little bit more than rather than it being like a last shot in the last 30 seconds or something. But yeah,
I guess you have the freedom. That's like Steph Curry.
that was a little different to Booker's. Booker kind of was bailed out or looking to bail out at the end of the shot clock. Like, Dame literally planned to do that as he was walking down the court, which was ridiculous.
17 seconds left on the shot clock. I remember I had that very clearly in my head. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much there is more to say. I guess the last point I want to make on the Booker thing, I can't remember. We were talking about this last night. Somebody, this is so huge for keeping him here.
Yeah.
I believe him that he loves Phoenix. I really do. I believe him that he wants to be the franchise icon, the best player in our history, the guy who finally gets it done for us, all that stuff. But if this organization was a tire fire for the rest of his contract, I promise you he's not coming back. Why would he? It'd be stupid to come back. I wouldn't come back if I were him either. You can't waste your entire life on this franchise because they drafted you. That's stupid. This showed him, and showed me, honestly, and showed a lot of us that the Suns could maybe be real going forward. Like, maybe we're not going to have to deal with a team that's going to be putrid and ill run and all that forever.
Yep.
This was just so big from that perspective. Like, you see the props other players are giving the Suns. Beal was on that today. You see the Ringer today. I saw two pro Suns Ringer articles, which is insane for one day. One saying Booker should be the MVP of the tournament, and one saying that we should replace Orlando with the Suns in the playoffs. So that's new. That was not the kind of hinge we were getting before. So That kind of like image change is a huge fact that we can't overlook.
Yeah, the amount of national articles about the Suns and Devin Booker in just the last 4 or 5 days. I think we've talked about this a bit. I kind of wake up and the US has done what it's going to do for the day. So I'm trying to play catch up from the moment that I wake up. And, this morning there was, I'm going to say, at least half a dozen articles that I read as I woke up in bed in the morning, and that was just a complete change to what I'm used to in terms of trying to find people talking about the Suns. Normally, I just end up going to the same people, Callan Olsen, Gerald, Bouguet, right. The list goes on from a Phoenix perspective, but all of a sudden there's this influx of other national guys who want to talk about the team. So, yeah, I think it only lasts so long, but I think it was a great way to end the year, considering what the alternatives were. Like no going to the bubble, so they end the year on the note, I suppose, when the season got suspended, which isn't great. Not a great feeling to kind of end your 5th year in the NBA with. Or, let's pretend COVID just never happened. What a great world that would be right now. But I think really important to note that the Suns weren't playing that well when the season got suspended. They had a few injuries. The team just looked a little tired. They kind of got a chance to reset here and come in knowing that they were likely only going to play these 8 games, play as hard as they could. I really think about what we've had to put up with and what Booker's had to put up with the last few years, where those last games in, April and I don't know. Do we even play in May? I can't even remember.
No, yeah, it's halfway through April when the playoffs start.
Yeah, March and April, let's say. Yep. We're just hoping the season's over by then. You might get a Booker 50-point game against some rubbish team that isn't playing for anything, or it's not fun to be a Suns fan, and I doubt it's fun for Devin Booker to play those last 10 games of the year. So this is a complete change to what we're used to, and honestly what could have still happened if this whole bubble thing didn't end up happening. So yeah, just really great that Booker could end his season on that note and have a bit of positivity, because I just think after this there's very little chance there's any thought that comes into his mind in however long this off-season ends up being that's negative about kind of the outlook for the Phoenix Suns, which, that's a huge difference. But again, I got to say, will only last so long. We've got to build on this momentum and make sure that they, catapult into next season with things being just as positive. Max.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not going to last long. We're going to get some preseason hype now. Like, there's going to be some national writers that say, hey, the Suns could beat the playoffs. We'll get some predictions that way. But if we don't start off well in the season and have a bad year, it's going to be for naught. So, yes, let's hope it carries on. But should we go to number 4, David? I may have gushed about Devin Booker enough.
Yeah, I want to mention one more thing. Yeah. He shot 56.8% from mid-range in the bubble, which is 16.3 percentage points above league average, Max, and 10.7% points above just what Devin Booker shot for the rest of the regular season, which we already know he was a great mid-range shooter. Like, this guy in 8 games had one of the most incredible stretches from mid-range that you're probably ever going to see, considering how much that type of game is dying in pro players these days. So yeah, that I can't talk about that enough. He was just ultra nuclear from that part of the floor in these 8 games, Max.
He's got to be. I mean, even before this bubble, he was arguably the best mid-range scorer in the NBA. I don't think there's even an argument anymore. The amount of moves that guy has, he literally has every move, David. He can do anything he wants against you in the court. My favorite may have been the Dallas game, the most recent one, that when he froze, I can't remember who was even guarding him, but he just froze the dude and then went right by him for the easiest dunk ever.
Yep.
It's just like, God, how do you guard this guy at this point? Oh, another new move before we go on to number 4. I swear we're going to leave Devin Booker at some point. He did this maybe 4 or 5 times in the bubble, maybe even a little bit more. This little where he freezes somebody on the baseline and just kind of makes him think he's trapped. And then just kind of floats a ball up and then it just goes in.
Yeah.
You know what shot I'm talking about? He did 5 times.
Yeah.
That's that was new. He never did that before, right?
Yeah, there's so many times where you think he's basically stuck in the corner. And I highlighted one from the OKC game where he just kept his head up, looks completely stuck with nowhere to go. Dort comes over to help. He notices Dort go into the lane as a help defender. He knows that he can only be there for 3 seconds. So literally you see him count it out in his head. And the moment that Dort takes a step back to go out of the lane so he doesn't get the 3 seconds, Devin Booker takes off baseline. And like, we could go for 2 hours about Devin Booker, Max, because he's just phenomenal for a 23-year-old is probably how we should end this little segment on Booker. Don't forget, guys, we're watching a 23-year-old do this.
It's really unbelievable. A 23-year-old who just became the all-time franchise leader in 30-point games. Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of fun in front of us with Devin Booker. But let's go to number 4, David. I'm sure this is another player who's going to be great. Who do you have at number 4?
I'm going with Ricky Rubio.
Wow. So this is such a good example of why this is going to be so hard. I have Rubio at 1. And I mean, listen, I could put my 4 through 1 in any order, basically. I switched around a million times. But so give me your case. I want to hear, why do you have Rubio above the other obvious contenders?
Well, give me your 4. We said we'd kind of go Zach Lowe style here.
Okay. All right.
I want to know whether... we'll see based on who they are, who I'm more excited to talk about, and then we'll go with that person.
Devin Booker was the reason we were always good on offense the entire time we were in the bubble. Mikal Bridges was the reason we were always good on defense the entire time we were in the bubble. He is my number 4 for giving us consistency on that end.
Love it. I have Mikal at 3. So considering we're a little closer on that, let's go with Bridges first so we can leave Rubio for a little bit later. We know he's still coming.
Yeah, so listen, I get why people would be maybe surprised by this. Maybe not. I mean, he's getting a lot more love these days. And Suns fans, that meme showed us that, and Suns fans are definitely in. We all tweeted his name for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
But, I mean, defensively, he was just unbelievable. I think the big reason why we won the Indiana game was because he just made TJ Warren go away. And by the way, Suns fans really wanted TJ Warren to go away for that game because that would have been really bad if he would have scored 40 in that game.
Yep.
No one would have enjoyed that. So, I mean, he was just so consistent on that end the whole time through. Unfortunately, the scrimmages, he was a little better on offense there, I think, but he kind of got his groove back towards the end. In the Dallas game, he was amazing on offense, and the three-point shooting was great. He had one play. Again, the OKC and the Philadelphia games blended into me because they were kind of the exact same.
Yeah.
But whatever the play was where he stole, like they were trying to bring the ball up, and he stole the ball at half court. It was after a turnover, I think, and then he hits a 3. Yeah. You know what play I'm talking about?
I do, yeah.
That play just encapsulates Mikal Bridges to me. There's so much potential there. And man, if he can get the offense to a point where he can do that little thing where he dribbles in and takes that like little 10-footer, like he could be a real player, David.
His touch looks really good on those, so
yes.
I would not be surprised if that becomes more of I don't think it's the shot, it's more the confidence to put the ball on the floor, even when there's some hands hanging around to actually do it. But yeah, almost 13 points per game, 48, 40, 82 splits, 4 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.1 steals, and almost 1 block per game, which got me thinking, I'm starting to really believe that Mikal might be one of those really special wing-type defenders that can literally average a steal and a block per game for his career, or at least a couple of his peak seasons, because he's just everywhere on defense, and he keeps getting all the key assignments. Just in the bubble here, he had Luka, a bit of Kawhi and Paul George. As you said, completely stopped TJ Warren before the media then credited Jimmy Butler with stopping TJ Warren's run, which, Mikal did that 2 games before. And then even some lesser assignments on, Duncan Robinson had a pretty rough shooting night for the Heat, and I think he probably even guarded CP3 in that OKC game a little bit at the point of attack as well. So just such a versatile defender, and you touched on it before, and this is what I was talking about with Monty and Rolls, and I think we watched those scrimmage games and we kind of went into the real games almost expecting that from Mikal. So then when it didn't come in the first couple of games, we're really disappointed. But I think it speaks a little bit to Ayton as well here, particularly while they were winning, but I think it's probably a little nicer to Ayton than what it is to Mikal here. But I just think Monty had them locked into what they needed to do as individuals for each game for the team to get the win. And that's why I would have loved to have seen it, but I'm not too worried about it. It's good that we got those flashes from the scrimmages, but maybe this off season he can really work on that and come back next season, because I think if things went differently and they lost a few games early on, they might have tried a few different things, but going on an 8-0 run, I'm not going to nitpick that Mikhail wasn't aggressive enough. And I do think over the course of the games, it got better. It was probably the first couple where it really stood out, on the back of those scrimmage games.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, Suns fans, did you enjoy Sean Marion? Because we may have another one. I really think that. I think we may have another one. He is so unique. And that's what made... So Sean Marion was so unique because his bounce was absolutely out of this world. It's unbelievable. And what makes Mikhail so unique is that his arms are longer than everybody's arms in the whole world. And you can't overstate how much that matters. I make this point over and over and over. I'm a broken record. But the fact that his arms are that long just makes him so hard to anticipate. Defense, you think you have a wide lane to the rim and he just envelops you. It's over. Because every other player in the league is 3 inches behind where his arms are. So it's really interesting. I think that he has such high potential. I don't want to really get into super hot takes here, but offensively, kind of the sky's the limit with him. Mm-hmm. Some of the finishes he was making around the rim, he had these especially reverse layups. His reverse layup touch is out of this world. You're right that his touch and jumpers looked really good, and then some of the 3-point shooting towards the end looked really, really good. I don't even know. I think we're looking at. I was going to ask you this later, as per 7 seconds or less. I'm not going to ask it to you. I'm just going to pose it to you. And to the listeners for thought, I just wonder where we're going to be on Ayton versus Mikhail in a year. I just wonder where we're going to be on that, David.
I think it's starting to creep into the conversation a little bit. I've seen it a few times in the last couple of weeks of these bubble games, and I think it makes the point for me that I was trying to make with Mikhail and defending Mikhail for a long time, either on the podcast or just in general on Twitter. I think I always maintained that when games were going to matter, that's when people were going to notice Mikal Bridges. And you just summed it all up there perfectly. His defense, that move's kind of becoming a pattern move for him where he's still kind of skinny, so guys can kind of get into his chest going into the paint and knock him off his spot, but he still manages to stick the arm up and block the shot. And I think it was Zach Lowe or someone commented, that they don't know of a guy who blocks a shot on his man rather than a help defender in that occasion, more than kind of anyone in the NBA. And I think what you touched on there with the finishing on offense, he's always known how his length helps him on defense, and that's been obvious from the very first game that he played for Phoenix. But I think he's just starting to learn how those extra long arms and the extra long strides can help him finish around the rim, when I think early on in his first year and even early on in this season, he just didn't realize that the defender can only go so far, and he would kind of panic himself out of certain situations. He just looks so much more calm in those situations now. And you mentioned the 3-point shot. Yeah, he's 40% from 3 in the bubble on 4.4 attempts. But I also just wanted to touch on that Boston game earlier in the season where he hit, I think it was 6 of 8, and everyone was kind of like, oh, is this it? Has it changed? And then he kind of got spotty again. And then if you go back to that game and go from that point all the way through to the end of the bubble, he's still 39.7% on 3.9 attempts. So this is not a case of just the bubble being a small sample size to overreact to. I think the shot has been there for quite a little while now, and that gives me really great confidence that this isn't just a flash in the pan that is going to disappear again. I'm pretty sure it's almost all the way there. And I said earlier in the week, I think it's just confidence now, and we've basically got that Villanova jump shot back after whatever the hell we want to call that, season and a half of diversion on the shot, Max.
Yeah, the Mikhail's shot odyssey. But it really has come back, man. And I think that's a great point to make about the aesthetics of it. Even so the Boston game, it looked pretty good, and it kind of has just gotten progressively better looking, weirdly. Usually shots change very quickly, but Mikhail's just by inches gets better looking. And then in the bubble, towards the end of the bubble, it started to look gorgeous. It was looking really, really good. I tweeted, I think I was wrong, but I tweeted, I think it was the Philadelphia game. I was like, Mikhail's not going to miss another shot in this game. He's so confident in his shot. I think he missed the very next one. But he made a couple after that. But yeah, it just got to the point where you start to believe in him. The confidence was obviously there, and it's really exciting. But let's go to the next person, David, because we're on a pace right now where we'll be talking for the rest of the night. So should we do Rubio now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, we both know he's in our top 5, so let's go Ricky Rubio, and then we can.
All right, you give me your case on him because you had him for.
I just think he continues to be criminally underrated on this team and in the league in general. I actually would go as far. I'm not sure when they're going to release these. And I really don't think he'll get on it because just counting stat-wise, there's going to be too many guys out of 22 teams. I think he has a legit argument to be the point guard on the, all-bubble second team, just with how good he was for the Phoenix Suns. He had 13 points per game. His splits were 43 from the field, 43 from 3, and 95 from the free throw line. He had 4.9 rebounds per game. He had almost 8 assists per game, which is slightly down on his season average. But, Max, he played 26.8 minutes per game when he averaged 31 during the regular season. And I think this is going to be, again, a story from the bubble when we look back at him. Obviously, a guy we're going to get to a bit later, I'm not sure how much later, helped with restricting minutes for Ricky Rubio a little bit, but the efficiency went up. The defense, I think, was better. As I said, the similar assists in 4 less minutes a game for him, and I think this is what we're seeing with Ricky Rubio. We saw him win a World Cup MVP when he could kind of prepare himself for a maximum of 8 games. He probably went into this bubble knowing there was going to be a maximum of 8 games, even though they came very, very close to going the under 1% odds of extending that at least by a couple of games. And I just think he's such a stabilizing force on this team. And I just think that if they can, over the next couple of years, keep those minutes to, around 27 to 30 minutes a game and not over rely on Ricky Rubio, and Devin Booker doing what he's doing on the ball is going to help with this for sure. I just think we're going to get, he's not going to be Steve Nash, don't get me wrong, Max, but he is only 30 next year, and that was the question I was going to pose. Like, can he do a Steve Nash? I'm not talking, revolutionize the league, win 2 MVPs, in his early 30s, but everyone wrote Ricky Rubio off. Like, everyone was like, oh, he's been a pro since 15, like, it's a steady decline. He's just had his best season in the NBA for the Phoenix Suns, and I'm convinced that I think it's the minutes. If they can keep the minutes down and build a team with more guards on it, I think we're going to get really, really good Ricky Rubio for the next couple of years.
Well, so let me ask you this. Maybe this is the way you approach it then, and this is totally a tangent. But maybe the Suns, what they should be looking at is to get their, young superstar, point guard or other guard. It doesn't necessarily be a point guard. It could be, a Bradley Beal type. It's not necessarily, super young, but, maybe what they should be looking for is to go get a Jrue Holiday, go get a Bradley Beal, go get somebody who's really damn good to play with Booker as the starter, so you can have Rubio kind of be your Ginobili / early Harden type 6-man who doesn't play starter minutes, but is really, really important and plays a ton. And if he's playing really well, maybe he finishes games. But you put him in a role like that where he's not overtaxed, and he can also kind of be a mentor to the 2 guards in front of him. What do you think about that?
That it's exactly again. You've doubled up on my notes here. I had Payne was great, but also showed why I wouldn't be worried for Ricky Rubio's future on the Suns, even if they went out and added another legit guard. And I think we see so many trade scenarios or free agency signings where the fine print basically says, and obviously Ricky Rubio would be going out the other way, or if you sign such and such,
right, then
you'd be looking to trade Ricky Rubio for another piece. And I'm just not sure it's that simple. Yeah, I just think, we're going to make this point a few times, that the Suns aren't in a position yet to be removing, legit NBA players off the roster for non-NBA players, Max. They still only have 7 or 8 probably on the roster that they can count on from game to game. So, yeah, I think we fully agree on this. If Rubio keeps this type of form up, and he can be part of a 3-guard rotation where you don't need to get too fiddly or think too much about how that actually looks from a minutes or starters versus bench players perspective. You could just actually be looking at having 3 really fucking good NBA guards, and that's how you win in this league. And, Booker and Rubio, just as a duo from a playmaking standpoint, that's why the Suns lead the league in assists this year, because of those two guys.
They're so damn good together. Even you and I were questioning the fit because Rubio is not the best shooter, although he was pretty damn good in the bubble.
Yep.
But yeah, from a playmaking standpoint, it's just gorgeous when those two play together. And that's kind of why, and this is another sort of a tangent related to what we're talking about, but, man, if they could just find a way to go get Bradley Beal, I just feel like a 3-guard rotation of Booker, Beal, and Rubio, where you can have 2 of them on the floor at all times, basically. I mean, that's incredible. You're the best offense in the NBA.
It would be insane. And I think even the positivity that we had on that free agency reaction pod to Ricky Rubio, I don't think we could have even thought that him and Devin Booker were going to mesh so well so quickly as a kind of duo. And yeah, the shooting helps. I think he's over 40% on catch and shoot threes, and was kind of slowly phasing any of the pull-up stuff out of his game as the season went on. He clearly knows and is confident in the catch stuff, and knows that it's a bad shot for him to take too much off the dribble. And yeah, I can't speak highly enough of him. I said a few times during the year that I didn't know whether my view of him was a little, shaded by the fact that we just hadn't seen an NBA point guard on the floor for the Phoenix Suns in so long, so I was kind of overhyped for him. But just watching him operate in these 8 games, I just can't say enough about him. I just think I'm so happy for him that he's kind of revived his career, so to speak, because the Utah stuff was a bit of a disaster with Donovan Mitchell, and he kind of got the red tape wrapped around him after that of he's always the problem. And kind of look at how Utah's gone with Conley this year, who was supposedly meant to be the perfect fit, and how well Rubio and Booker have gone together. And yeah, I just couldn't be happier for him, Max. Yeah,
Utah's kind of a junky offense to be in if you're a guard not named Donovan Mitchell. I would not want to be in that offense.
Or a giant center. It's a pretty junky offense to be part of too.
That's a good point. It's kind of a junky team. I'm not looking forward to watching their playoff games, I'll say. But, okay, so let's go on to number 3, maybe my number 3, since we've done your... No, you know what? Because we've done your one...
We've done my top 3 now, so we need to know your 3.
All right, so my number 3 may be surprising. I have Dario Saric, David.
And he is my number 2, so we've now done my top 4. So let's talk about Dario.
He was, quite a revelation. I think the problem with him, he showed signs of this in the season, right, David? He had played at this level at certain times before. The consistency, though, was what was different. There were stretches in the regular season where he was just awful. Mm-hmm. There were no stretches like that in the bubble, I don't think. He was fantastic. He was sort of the anchor of the bench unit as a bench 5. Weirdly didn't expect that. I mean, I'm not even sure. That might have been Monty's number 1 adjustment, was oh man, we can't play Frank. So they went to Dario at 5. It worked for the bench unit. He had to step in to start a quarter when Ayton had his moment. And he did that admirably. I just thought he was great, David. I think the whole time he was consistent, he got us huge buckets. I remember the Clippers game, early 4th quarter. He really kind of gave us a nice little cushion early on in the 4th. Made a couple inside buckets. He was just good. His 3-point shooting was nice. I really liked him, David. His work was great.
It's kind of only just come to me listening to you speak about Dario and kind of the flashes that he showed earlier on in the season. If I think about it anecdotally without looking at his kind of game log, I'm going to say I feel like most of those came during the DeAndre Ayton suspension and earlier on in the year when the team was really rolling. And I think...
Yeah, probably.
Frank, Dario, and Aaron Baines were basically the 3 big rotation when Ayton was out. But you wouldn't even, other than Aaron Baines being a center, 2 of them kind of always played with each other, but you couldn't even really define who was the center and who was the power forward in a lot of the offensive sets that they were running. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks a lot to the role that he found himself here with in the bubble. And I swear we were saying it quite a lot during the year that he looked like a backup 5, just the way that he was playing. And, he's had almost 15 points per game, shot 57 from the field, 52 from 3, and 88 from the free throw line. And that's on 4.1 free throw attempts a game. He only had 1.6 free throw attempts a game earlier before they got to the bubble, and all his splits were way down and his counting stats were way down as well. So I think kind of ironically the key has been to move him away from the things that, you know, he had potential in since being a rookie and that maybe he thought he was good at, like as a playmaker. You know, I remember talking about when we traded for him of like, oh, he's going to be out, you know, we can run some big to big stuff with DeAndre Ayton and maybe even, you know, play him as a playmaker from the elbow, and he's going to be a great stretch four from us because we just haven't had shooters. And I think if you lean too much into that stuff for Dario, that's where it kind of falls apart a little bit, because it is all just flashes and potential. He's never really been able to consistently do either of those things throughout his, you know, whole short NBA career so far. They just threw him out as a backup 5. They said, you're mostly going to be against a smaller 5, because for some reason in the NBA now it just seems to be a trend where, you know, your backup unit is smaller, like you're going with a bunch of wings, or you're still playing traditional with your starting 5, but then when you start to experiment a little is when you go to your backup unit. So Dario had the mismatch almost every game as a 5, and he was just bullying his way to the post. He was sealing, he was getting free throw attempts, and they just simplified his game. They weren't asking him to do too much, and that's why we saw the best of him, I think, in these, you know, games. We'll get to another guy in a minute, but you compare his 23 minutes to an unnamed guy who played 30 minutes and what they both averaged, and you know, there's a bit of a conversation to have there, Max.
Yeah, not a conversation that's fun to have. No, I think you made an excellent point there when you said that, you know, Dario, instead of doing the things that as a prospect he was lauded for and that he probably viewed himself as able to do, he really just kind of went, you know, knuckles and bolts, bring your lunch pail, and just kind of went to work in the post, which is something that, you know, his finishing was kind of a problem at times in the season. Yeah. I think largely because he was playing against starters more in the season. It's harder to play against NBA 4s and 5s in the post as compared to bench players in the post. That's probably part of it, but you're totally right. That's where he made his money, was he was always just really playing tough in the post. And then I think they probably maybe gave him the confidence when he was playing well to hit the threes he started making. Because if I remember correctly, the three-point shooting was not great to start and then became amazing towards the end. And I wonder if that's really just the confidence he sort of built in himself, scoring so easily down low against bench players who he's more skilled than. You know, he's probably the same size as them or a little undersized as compared to against starters, but he's more skilled than them. And I think he really found a niche doing that. And I guess the question I have for you, David, is, like, are we going to bring this guy back?
Well, the question I had for you, Max, funnily enough, was you've got the room exception for 2 years. Do you give it to him or Aaron Baines?
Him. Listen, I really, really like Aaron Baines. I know I might get, like, you might throw me off the podcast right now for saying that. But it's because of the age. I think, like, Dario can grow with you a little bit. So it's him for me. What would you say?
No, I think I'm with you. And I think the only variable is that, you know, it may take more than the room exception for one or both of them, particularly given you can only give it for 2 years. And you know, both of those guys, maybe not Baines, he's probably looking for decent money for 2 years as an older guy, but Dario might float somewhere else where they've given him a longer term commitment. But, you know, I don't want to, you know, have too much recency bias here, but yeah, him as the backup 5 in that role, and then you probably just go and get a vet minimum guy who gives something different to him and DeAndre Ayton. You know, maybe like just a beanpole shot blocker type guy that sits at the end of the bench, and then you've kind of got your rotation with 3 bigs. So yeah, I'm by the day getting myself, I guess, used to the fact that Aaron Baines might not be coming back on the Suns. But yeah, I just can't remember him missing in these last 8 games. I know I read out his percentages, but you kind of said it there. Earlier in the year, he just wasn't hitting anything, and then it just seemed like in the bubble he couldn't miss. And with the 3-point shooting stuff, I just think that was pressure. I think thinking about a lot of the sets that they run, as I said before, like really trying to lean into him being a stretch 4. Yeah. I just think he was, you know, missing a lot in situations where he was expected to take shots, whereas in the bubble he was kind of a bailout option for Devin Booker and stuff at times when, like, the defense was, you know, really coming in on Booker. So he was just letting it fly with very little pressure. And I just think that that's something to kind of weigh into the conversation where they weren't putting the workload on him. That it was more like the game was coming to him a little bit more.
Totally agree. And I don't know if you saw that article, David, about him. He was asked if he would want to return to Phoenix, and he said something along the lines of like, "Yeah, it reminds me of home. Nice weather. I'll go back."
I did see that, and talking about what we were talking about with Devin Booker and going into the off season with a bit more positivity, I highly doubt you get that same answer from Dario if the season ended back when it was suspended, because he wasn't playing well. He didn't have a role really to look forward to going into the next season, and 8 games is kind of all it took for that to completely switch up.
Yeah, unless he really just wanted to be the same weather as where he's from or whatever he said. That'd be the only reason.
True.
That's just the only reason. Okay, I'll do my last one, my number 2. And maybe I'm guessing he probably is your number 1. Because he maybe was my favorite part of the whole thing. I can't believe we haven't talked about it yet. It's Cam Johnson.
This was really hard for me, and I suspected we were going to differ on it because, I've gone DeAndre Ayton, but I really want to leave DeAndre Ayton for its own. We can kind of start up the top with him maybe in the following section. So, you know me. I'm not afraid to rant and rave about Cam Johnson, so let's go with him for this first section.
I'm just trying to get over that. I'm still dazed by you saying that. that you just gave Ayton a star over Cam Johnson. I gotta take a moment here. Okay, all right. So Cam Johnson, I kind of feel like was almost the key to the whole thing, and the fact that putting him as the 4 in the starting lineup just kind of changed the whole dynamic of the Suns' offense.
Yep.
It made them so much harder to guard because you just can't leave Cam Johnson. You could never leave him. You can't leave Rubio the way he was shooting, and Booker obviously. Like the spacing just got different. It got to the point where it was really hard to guard them, and I think a big part of that was Cameron Johnson's spacing. He didn't overall. He only ended up at 35% from 3 because I think he kind of tailed off towards the end.
Yep.
But the fact that he was there and being able to play decent enough defense at the 4 to justify him being there and also he was good in transition. He was able to do other things. Like the fact that he was able to just survive as an NBA player on everything else made his shooting that much more deadly. A 6'9" guy who can shoot that way and not kill you everywhere else is so valuable.
It's ridiculous. And he only had 5.4 3-point attempts, just behind Devin Booker for second on the team. We say it about Booker all the time, but this guy is a much better 3-point shooter than Devin Booker even. I think is not
definitely
too much of a stretch to say. It needs to keep going. It needs to be like 8 3-point attempts a game, and that would be where you could really get excited about him being the long-term starter here. Again, another guy that I wanted to throw to you first. I'm glad that you went off the top because I've gushed about him enough recently, and you thought he was good enough to put in your top 5, which I certainly don't disagree with. A couple of other things that speak to your point at the top there, Max. He was 3rd in plus-minus for the bubble, behind, I believe, Cameron Payne and maybe Mikal Bridges, actually. But more importantly, because that can be a little bit of a noisy stat, 3rd in minutes. And I think there was 3 games in a row early on when everything was on the line where even when he wasn't shooting that well, he was the top minutes getter, particularly because of foul trouble to Devin Booker, obviously. But in at least 2 of the big games, and I think it may have even been 3 games in a row where he had the most minutes. And you want to look for little signs and tea leaves about how a coach thinks about a guy. If he's playing the most minutes with what his supposed weaknesses are and not shooting that well or with great confidence, that says a lot about what Monty believes just his presence on the court does for the Phoenix Suns. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. They've gone 8-0 with a brand new starting lineup. I think it got used one other time earlier in the season against the Lakers and they got blown off the court early on. But that says it all about Cam Johnson, and I think he's a great team defender. He got knocked pre-draft for his individual defense. He just commented the other day that he really feels like that surgery that he had has kind of helped him in terms of individual defense, and who'd argue with him based on what we've seen in these 8 games. Like he still struggles against quick guards and stuff, but who doesn't as a 6'9", forward in the NBA? There's not many guys that can stay with guards, but as far as guarding his position and guys of similar size, I think he did a really, really good job.
Yep.
And his team defense is the bigger thing as kind of a low usage guy in a starting 5 with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, because I just feel like every weak side rotation where the ball got swung, he was just there every single time.
Yep.
And defense in the NBA is a lot about just being in the right place at the right time, Max. And an older rookie who understands the game, I think we really saw that with Cameron Johnson.
I think the biggest compliment I can give him on defense is that, especially as a 6'9" stretch 4, I just don't really notice him.
Exactly.
Yep. He's just in the right places, and he's not making plays or anything, but he's not screwing up at all. You're not like, oh god, Cam Johnson just gave up another layup. You never say that. He just blends in. I think it's the best thing you can say about him. I was looking at the plus minuses while you were talking, and it went Cam Payne, Cam Johnson, Devin Booker were tied.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. So I did not realize Cam Payne was number 1 in plus minus. Not super surprised. Maybe he should have been on this list. I'm not sure. I thought about him. I did give it an honorable mention too. Maybe we'll go to that now because this is going longer than we expected, but we knew it was going to go long.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing I'd say on Cam Johnson, which I think you kind of alluded to there, but 2.4 assists to 0.4 of a turnover. Like, he literally just makes the right play every time. And I said in a newsletter a couple of issues ago, he's the kind of guy with a starting lineup where he's just going to average 3 assists a game and you don't notice him because he just makes the right pass. And, I was thinking about the TJ Warren conversation we had for so long as Suns fans, and what is now, not going to lie, the Kelly Oubre conversation. Guys who basically don't average over 1 assist, but also have more than that or similar in turnovers, where it basically cancels themselves out. And, that stat alone is why you can talk yourself into a guy like Cam Johnson over Kelly Oubre. That's
a great point. While you're saying that, I was looking at the assists and turnovers. The only guy on the Suns rotation who had more turnovers than assists was Dario Saric, interestingly. That makes sense. He was not trying to pass. But I love the other thing I noticed while I was looking at the stats was so Cameron Johnson averaged 32.4 minutes a game and had 0.4 turnovers. So 32.4, 0.4 turnovers. That's amazing. That's so good.
He makes the right play.
That's actually crazy. Is there anybody like that in the NBA who over 30 minutes and under 0.5 turnovers? That's nuts.
Yep. Yeah, you're not wrong.
I don't even know how to do that. That's crazy. But I just want to go honorable mention to the entire bench. Obviously, I mean we highlighted Dario, but we have to honorable mention here Payne and Javon Carter, right?
Yeah, totally. As we said at the top, it was actually really hard to do 5, and I think after Did You Know here, we'll get a chance to maybe just talk a little bit about, I guess, the remaining few guys who played really, really well in Orlando, Max.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to get them above the Did You Know just to get their names out there because they deserve that.
100%.
All right, David, let's do it. Did you know?
Max, I couldn't do another 7 seconds or less pod and not throw a Did You Know your way. So did you know the 15-win increase from last season to this one would rank only 6th in terms of a win increase in the Suns' 52-season history? First question, Max. Can you think of any of the Phoenix Suns teams that made a drastic leap like that in the past?
I certainly can think of one, David. It's hard not to think of the Steve Nash one.
Yep, that is the big one that'll come in a minute. But in ascending order, 96 to 97, they had a 16-win increase from 40 to 56 wins, with none other than Antonio McDyess leading the charge there. The first to second season, 68 to 69, 23-win increase after the first season in the NBA. 2012 to 13, there was also a 23-win increase where the Suns, of course, still missed the playoffs with 48 wins under Jeff Hornacek. 87, when I think you and I were both born, Max, to 88, 27-win increase from 28 to 55 wins and a conference finals berth. And as you said, 04 to 05, a 33-win increase when MV Steve came to town to play for his second time with the Phoenix Suns. Now, Max, There were one or two others in there, but they were all coming off shortened seasons and such. But it did get me thinking. The bubble run maybe skews things a little here, but if the Suns played out a full 82-game schedule on their current win percentage, they would have actually ended up with something like 38 wins for the season. Obviously, that would have been double the 19 mark set last year and rank as the outright 5th best ever leap in Suns franchise history. But in terms of finding which season that best matched up with, I think it was the one that we witnessed under Jeff Hornacek. It was pretty damn hard to find an exact kind of replica here through the long history because, as you know, we either had good playoff teams or disastrous lottery teams, so not too many times that they made a leap and still didn't make the playoffs. So not a lot in the middle there. But the most recent team to barely miss, as I said, was the team in 2013, and clearly we do not want a repeat of how things went from there. 39 wins followed by 23, 24, 21, and last season's 19. So maybe we should let that serve as a reminder of what not to do. So one last game to end here, Max, and I'm going to match moves that were made in that off-season with moves the Suns could make this off-season, and I want your quick thoughts on what you think the Suns should do. Are you ready?
Okay. Let's do it.
So first up, the Suns had pick 14 in that draft and chose TJ Warren, a flat-out scorer, to develop going forward. This time, I should say, the Suns likely have pick 10. Are you trading it or using it? And if you use it, what type of player do you think we need to get?
Ooh, good question. I would probably try to trade it. I don't know what we could get for it, but I would try to trade it. If I use it, I would use it on probably I think we could still use a little athleticism. I think I'd use it on like a backup, maybe even athletic big, something like that. Maybe athletic guard, something athletic.
I like it. Next up, Channing Frye was in the news a little bit on Twitter today, but he was a great veteran presence on that first team, but McD let him walk in free agency. Do you let Baines walk this offseason? We spoke about it a little bit before, but you spoke about, his locker room presence. Is it going to hurt like it did with Channing Frye back then?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, to be clear, I still would try to bring him back, I think. I mean, I'm not letting him go for no reason.
Yep,
but,
true.
I mean, I would prioritize, at this point, maybe Sarge over just because of age. So it's probably unlikely to bring him back. It would suck. And, yeah, Channing Frye, I was sad to hear what he said today about Mikal Bridges. That was insane. Mikal Bridges clapped back a little bit, and I was happy to see that because Mikal Bridges is better at defense than Trevor Ariza maybe has ever been. He was really good for a while. I just think Bridges is better, so sorry.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Saric was part of that discussion earlier, but next thing that the Suns did was they locked PJ Tucker up long term, which wasn't necessarily a bad move, but things didn't quite work out, I don't think. Would you give Dario Saric a similar deal that he got, which was 3 years and around $16 million, I believe, in total, Max?
Yeah, I would do that. That's not very much money, for sure.
Cool. And later in the offseason, the Suns finally agreed to terms with Eric Bledsoe. It's not exactly like for like here, or even the same free agency type situation, but the Suns did trade for Kelly Oubre and are going to have a choice to make. What are you doing with Kelly Oubre long term, Max?
This is the part of the podcast where David gets me in trouble. I would absolutely, without a doubt, in my mind, trade Kelly Oubre. It's not even close.
All right.
Here's why. Because 1 year left. He's probably not coming back long term. It's very unlikely.
Yep.
His value is very high right now. People would like him. He has a very tradable contract, 15 years, only 1 year. So a team's not scared to take him on because it'll go off in 1 year, and it's a high dollar value, so you can aggregate it really easily to get things. I mean, if I were the GM of the Suns, if I were James Jones, I'd be itching to trade Oubre. It'd be really fun to trade Oubre.
Yep, and I'm with you, and I think it's really great that you brought it up that way because, I said not like for like so much with Eric Bledsoe, but I see a lot of fans now kind of wondering why we didn't pull the trigger on an Eric Bledsoe trade in hindsight, given the way things went with him. And I think from that perspective, the situations are pretty similar.
And by the way, David, I was for at least a year and a half before we actually traded Bledsoe, saying we got to trade Bledsoe. So at least we don't want. There's no way there's a year and a half for the Oubre thing because we only have a year time on it.
All right. Of course, finally, the trade deadline of 2015 is when Ryan McDonough went nuclear as the team wasn't quite performing the same as the year before. Max, what do you think the chances are that things have stalled at next season's trade deadline, and would you panic like it seemed Ryan McDonough did?
Oh, God. That just made me sad, David. I would like to think that I would not panic. I don't even know what the panic would be. Maybe trading Ayton? Would that be the panic?
Oof.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, then that said, maybe I would panic. I don't know.
Let's not get you in too much trouble on a one-off podcast episode. So that's it for Did You Know, Max. A bit different this time for a bit of a different episode for us, but let's jump back in and finish things off with the rest of the team that we alluded to just before.
Yeah, my first note here is Ayton, so I guess we should talk about Ayton.
Let's do it.
You had him on your list, so let's have you start with
Yeah, I think you look at the stats, only 15 points per game. 30% from three, 64% from the free throw line when he very rarely went there. I do think that the 8-0 run kind of covers the cracks a little. I think if there was a few losses here, I think that more people would be talking about how disappointing DeAndre Ayton was. But I think the only caveats and the reason I still had him as a 1-star here is he's the second guy I was alluding to before in terms of Monty's, everyone playing their role. And I think we didn't really see him, other than shooting the threes, I suppose, we didn't see him change too much from earlier on in the year, which, I was kind of hoping for and had kind of built him up that maybe that he would get to the free throw line more or, cut out the mid-range a little bit more, etc., etc. But I do still think that he had some pretty big fourth quarter moments in those first few games that they really needed to win. And that was why I gave him, I guess, the opportunity to still be the number 1 star guy for me, because I just think, individual moments that he had, the Clippers game, for instance, on both ends. I think the Pacers game, he still really stepped up when they needed him to. And for the most part, in those close games down the stretch, I say it all the time, big guys don't get smaller down the stretch. And I just think he sacrificed a little bit and was just in the right spots at the right time a lot of the time in those close games, which is kind of the most positive thing that I can say about him without, gushing about him, because I definitely don't think he was anywhere near as good as what I expected him to be in these 8 games, Max.
Yeah, I think everything you said is fair, and I don't want to totally kill him because I agree with you. I mean, there were some times where he was really good in the bubble. I think the Clippers and the Pacers games are good ones to bring up. And I think you made another good point. In the fourth quarters and when it mattered in crunch time, he was generally pretty good.
Yep.
He was much better when it mattered, which is good to see. Defensively, I think that when he was locked in, he was still what he was last. The improvement was still there. Mm-hmm. He did some really good things defensively, I thought, when he was locked in. I think what I was disappointed with him in is almost more of the offense. He just, the fact that he only, I posted this on Twitter and people got mad, but the 11 free throw attempts is just unacceptable. And a lot of those were not even him forcing the action. They were kind of BS fouls towards the end or whatever,
Yep.
It's that is not great. You can't be a big in the NBA and be a star and not get to the line at all. It doesn't happen. So that was disappointing. The 3-point shooting, I like to see him do it. It was obviously he was missing him a little later, but they looked good still. So that was a nice sign. So I like that. Some of the middies, David, I need more middies. Some of the especially it was really highlighted in the last game, the Dallas game. He was taking some garbage shots. And I should be fair and mention that he was really good from the mid range. I think it was in the Clippers game, or maybe it was the Miami game. There was one of those games where he had a really good mid range game. So I can't totally kill the middies, but I don't know, David. I get sick of watching him come in and out of games.
Yeah,
I just want him to show up. I want him to show up and care and really assert himself on a basketball court. I want him to be like, all right, I'm DeAndre Ayton. I'm the most physically gifted guy here. I want to show you that I am the best player on the court, and he just never does that. And that's why it's really hard for me with him. I need to see that sometimes.
I'm totally with you. I got frustrated quite a number of times, particularly when the team really needed him. So I don't want to be overly positive about him. You pretty much hit on everything that I wanted to hit on from a negative perspective with Ayton. My note here is, yes, he showed up down the stretch of games, but I just wish that he'd do it in the other 32 minutes of the game that he plays rather than just the 2 or 3, because that's when he becomes super impactful. 2.3 free throw attempts for the season, which is down on his rookie season, which when you're starting from such a low base is not the way you want to be going as a big in the NBA. And the middies, I can't talk enough. I get myself in trouble all the time, but how do you avoid it? Like, it's 25% of his shots at the moment, and it still was in the bubble, even though he started taking some threes. It wasn't at the sacrifice of a few mid-range shots, as I have alluded to in my writing, that at least that's one way that you could cut out the middies is by, taking the threes. And, it's just come to me. The funny thing is we call middies here in Australia mid-strength beer. So, basically like if you want to, drive or, not get too drunk but have a few beers, and I've just never understood the reason for them, and maybe that's the perfect illustration for why I don't understand why DeAndre Ayton takes these middies, because for me it's really simple with that analogy. Either you drink and you drink the hard stuff, or you don't drink at all, and that's exactly how I feel about DeAndre Ayton. You take threes and you take stuff at the rim where you are ridiculously efficient, and will give you the threes because it's a bit of fun every now and then when you want to, but just cut all the bullshit out in the middle. And if there's anyone listening to this getting, I guess, angry about us being too hard on him or whatever, I just asked the question that, I was going to ask you, Max, but you've basically already answered for me. And I would just say, outside of the few threes that he took and made in the bubble, what did DeAndre Ayton flash in these last 8 games or show improvement on? And if someone can give me an answer to that, I would love to hear it. But when, 8 games was such a huge percentage sample of the amount of games he actually played in his second year, you might think it's unfair to, I guess, take such a small sample, but I don't think it is when he missed such a big part of the year, and I was expecting bigger things from him, and I'd be frankly much more upset about it right now, Max, if the Suns didn't go 8-0 in Orlando.
David, that's totally unfair. He absolutely improved the length of time he got missed games because of the testing problem. He went from 25 games to 1 quarter, David. That's a massive improvement.
Oh, God, I don't even know what to say to that, so let's go to more fun stuff. Campaign. Or do you want to go Javon? I'll let you choose. Choose your own adventure.
God, I love both so much, and Javon Hive's going to kill me. But I tweeted about Javon Hive today, so I'm going to talk about Cameron Payne on the podcast.
Love it.
Cameron Payne shot 49% from the field, 42% from 3, and 86% from the line. As you said, he was the leader in plus minus. I think he was 3rd in assists for the team. He hit big 3 after big 3. He made big play after big play. David, it's kind of insane that we went this long without talking about this guy. He definitely was the biggest surprise of the whole thing.
Easily the biggest surprise. And, I'd love to be able to sit here and brag that I predicted it. That truthfully, I think I was scratching around for that backup rotation when I was writing my pre-bubble article, and I just kind of supposed that if you were going to pick one guy based off the scrimmage games that, he had the best chance to do something, but I certainly didn't think that it would be what he ended up doing. And, I basically wrote that, there might be 10 to 15 minutes a game in a couple of bubble games where how he plays might actually be the difference between winning and losing the game. And I just think, you think about at least 2 games, and I think you could probably even talk yourself into 3. That happened. And, best plus minus on the team, like we said before, and that kind of speaks to that. He saved a couple of games for us in particular. And yeah, who the hell expected that to be a storyline from the bubble? Certainly not me.
Definitely nobody in the whole world. Probably not even James Jones and Monty. I can't imagine. Maybe Campaign. That's probably the only person.
True.
He was so confident. I think that was the thing that was most surprising about him to me. I never felt like he was out of control or scared or out of place at all. He looked like he'd been doing it for 5 years. It was amazing. It's almost like he took a time machine in his career. That's really what it felt like to me. You don't usually see somebody go from being woefully inconsistent and bad to being incredibly consistent and good. I think he had one game, maybe it was the OKC game where he was not, no, I think it was Philly, where he was not good. Mm-hmm. But even in that game, I think he turned it on towards the end and started making plays. he was really good throughout the whole thing. And I mean, the fact that we have him on a team option next year is incredible. I mean, that's the easiest exercise of a team option of all time. I think, assuming we don't bring in a new guard as far as like a free agent or even a draft pick, I think like he's probably gonna get the first crack at being the sixth man, like kind of the guard of the bench, right?
Yeah, and I think without doubt with that contract, he's definitely back. It's not even worth throwing the question your way. I just think that it's health aside and knock on wood that he's coming back next year, and we're probably not going to do a nerdcast, so I'll just touch on it now.
we should say real quick, like, what are you going to go over what his actual contract is? I'm not sure everybody knows.
A team option for $25,000, I believe it is, that they can basically pick up tomorrow, and probably should. And then by doing that, it's then non-guaranteed, I believe, until the last day that deals are allowed to be non-guaranteed, which is, dates are going to be all out of whack with when the season starts, but in a normal October starting season, it would be mid-January when that kind of kicks in. So just a really, really smart contract with, the hindsight of how he's played. And I think it's basically a decision of what it changes for other guards on the roster, Max, rather than a decision about whether Cam's coming.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, it's hard to get a little crowded, even though I still think we can upgrade in the guard spot. Like, the fact that Payne and Carter played so well gives us a lot of options. And I have a guy, his name is Ty Jerome. I was really hoping he was going to show out in this thing. I guess the only thing that went poorly for me, I guess, in this whole thing.
I didn't really get much of a chance. Did hit a 3 the other day in junk time, which I kind of, just gave a quick shout out to you while I was watching by myself, because it was nice to see one go through the hoop.
I feel so bad for him. I feel like his 3-point shooting, I feel that he's in the most close misses in a row in the history of shooting threes. But back to the campaign, because he's who matters here. I mean, a huge revelation. I can't wait to see him next year. I hope he comes back and is the same guy, because if he is, he's going to be a real asset for this team and part of why they could be significantly improved next year.
Yep. And let's do the last guy. Hopefully not rush through it too much, because he definitely deserves a small spotlight. Jevon Carter, Max, 7 points per game, 50% from the field, 55% from 3, and I don't believe missed from the free throw line. And 2.4 assists per game, 2.4 rebounds. What was the biggest difference for you between bubble Jevon and regular season Jevon?
Great question. So I guess, and this is kind of unfair, the 3-point shooting was obviously just insane.
Yeah.
But it's small sample size, but 16 of 29, that's insane. So that was probably the biggest difference. But the biggest real difference that I noticed in his game was just more control, more, less of the dumb idiot stuff that young players do, where they just make mistakes. He was not doing that stuff. He was very, very control of himself, I thought, for the most part. And the Miami game we should focus on, that play he made against Bam Adebayo. Where
amazing.
Actually, one of the few bad things he did in the whole tournament was he kind of threw the ball away in a bad way on that play.
Yep.
Chased him down the whole way. You and I actually talked about this in a DM. We both thought he was going to foul the shit out of Bam. It was the most obvious foul, probably end one. That's what happens in those kind of plays. But instead, he somehow strips the ball on their baseline, takes it back the whole way, and I think they ended up like setting up Ayton for a pass or something like that, or for a bucket. But man, one of the plays of the whole tournament for me, and just he was great, amazing, David.
Could have been a play right up the top that we mentioned as like a non-buzzer beater play that you'll remember from the bubble, because that just spoke to the whole team. For me, it was kind of just how being part of a better team elevated what he does really well and eliminated kind of some of his flaws. And I think earlier in the season, he was, like a lot of guys, Ty Jerome being one, he was kind of asked to do too much that what he was actually good at doing. And I think shooting and defense, and particularly just hounding defense when he doesn't have to like guard the best guard on the team, for instance.
Yes.
And just not really being asked to play make. Like he was, virtually by playing him with Cam Payne and occasionally with Devin Booker, he was playing as a shooting guard, a 6-foot shooting guard, basically. And that is kind of how he's going to succeed. And kind of like the Cam Payne thing, 10 to 15 minutes a night, where I just feel like in every game he played, he made, 1 or 2 impact plays. The Bam one is obviously the biggest one. There was the one in the OKC game, I believe, where the ball went back court and he basically defended 94 feet again.
Yeah.
And it essentially forced OKC into a shot clock violation because they just didn't have enough time to bring the ball back up the court again, which was just a really smart play from him. I'll throw this last question your way, hopefully not stealing a 7 seconds or less question or anything like that. But, what's the most you pay him? Because I kind of joked if we could have him and campaign on like a Morris Twins style deal where you just say like, here's $3 million a year, share it amongst yourselves however you want, then I'm all for it. But I'd love him back as a 14th 15th guy on basically a vet minimum. I'm not sure whether another team comes knocking for more than that, but would you pay more for this version of Javon, Max?
So here it's context dependent for me. If you don't do a lot this summer, you decide you're waiting for the next summer, would I give him here, I'll give you 2 years, $10 million, but the second year is an option.
That's a great point. Yeah,
because then it doesn't matter, right? It really depends on if you do something better or not. But if you have money to spend, there's no reason not to, right?
Yep, totally agree. Well, I think we've got through everyone that's worth talking about. I did have a quick game for you, 1-word answer if you're
okay.
If you're game for it, and we don't have to talk about Monty because we touched on him up the top. So basically just give me 1-word answer on the rest of these guys and whether they'll be with the Phoenix Suns first day next season. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Frank Kaminsky.
No.
Aaron Baines.
No.
Kelly Oubre.
No.
Ali Okobo.
No.
Ty Jerome.
Probably, yeah, because he's cheap and I don't know what to do with him.
Check Diallo.
No.
Jalen LeCue.
Yes.
I believe that was 2 and a maybe. So 1, 2, 3. You're looking at probably 4 to 5 open roster spots in the off season, which I think is pretty reasonable.
How many? So we have our first. Do we have our second this year, or is that one of the ones we gave away?
We gave it away. We do not have a second round pick this year unless something changes.
We do have quite a bit of cap space, so if they decide to go for it, they can go for it. We'll see. It's a very interesting offseason. It really is.
It is, and looking a lot different on
Yes.
This time of the year with 8-0 in the bank rather than back earlier in the year. But should we go to our last regular segment here as we go back down memory lane a bit, Max, and jump to 7 seconds or less?
7 seconds or less is the segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which they have not prepared and have 7 seconds or less to answer. But this time, David, we both have questions for each other. We're still going to do the thing where we don't actually keep ourselves 7 seconds. We're going to do as long as we want. But we do have questions for each other. And I'm going to go first, David, because the perfect timing. This goes right into my first question for you.
Love it.
So now that Cam Johnson looks like there's a real good chance he's our long-term solution starting 4, what's the shopping list item here? What's your number one thing you want for this offseason?
I think we touched on it, and therefore I can probably keep my answer to 7 seconds. Get a third guard.
Yeah.
We don't have enough good guards on this team for the way that the NBA plays currently, and they've got the wings, they've got the bigs mostly sorted. Get a really good third guard with that cap space, or with a trade with a Kelly Oubre, for instance, Max.
Yeah, unless Cam Payne's going to shoot 51% from 3 for the whole season, you probably need a different guard. I like him, but we probably need a different guard. All right, give me yours.
All right, I've decided to base all mine kind of on the Suns, or what I view the Suns' core going forward. So my first one is Devin Booker will be 24 next season. Let's say his prime is the next 6 seasons till he turns 30. How many All-Star and All-NBA appearances does he make in that time? And what All-NBA team, if one, does he top out of in terms of where he gets selected in the next 6 years, Max?
Wow, that's quite a question. I think he makes every single year he's not injured in. So let's give him 1 injured year. So what is that, 5?
Yep.
All right, let's give him 5. Then I think it's going to be very hard to keep him out from here on out. I really do. In terms of the highest, I mean, a safer answer, and it's still not even that safe. And to me, it feels safe. Second team All NBA. You know what? I'm just going to do it. I think he's going to be first team one of these years. He's that good as a guard.
I don't think that's a wrong choice. I think doing this at 23, and you've got 6 years to do it. I can't imagine that it would be a shock that there's one of those years where he is one of the best 2 guards in the NBA, which is exciting to think about as a Suns fan, for sure.
It's only 8 games, but David, he was one of the best 2 guards in the bubble, so, like, that's crazy.
Yep.
All right, here's my second question. How many games do the Phoenix Suns win next year, David?
So, 38 they would have got to, even though it's a little bit skewed this year. I would be disappointed if they don't win 45 next year, Max.
That was my exact number, David. That's what I want.
Love it. And it's going to be largely on the back of this guy doing better things, Max. DeAndre Ayton is going into his 3rd NBA season next year. What percentage chance would you put on him making an all-defensive team while he's a Phoenix Sun?
Ooh, so you didn't say wow he's in his first contract, but wow he's a Phoenix Sun. That's very interesting. I think he'll make, I think pretty high for a second team. It's not that hard. I'd give him like let's give him 50-50 on that. I think he's that talented defensively that even if he never like develops to be as good as he could be, he could like make a second team defense just because like he's pretty damn imposing.
Yep, and just to have some positivity about Ayton after some people might think we bashed him before. Think about how, I guess, disappointing he was on the offensive end in the bubble, the flashes that he showed on defense, and the fact that the Suns finished 8-0. And if you still don't think that the defensive side of the ball is where Ayton's best value is, I don't know what to tell you.
That's a great point. And the other half of that is, imagine Ayton gets a lot better, how good the Suns are going to be. All right, let's go to my third, final one. So, and this is the only non-Suns thing we're talking about all podcasts. I have to ask you one non-Suns thing because, you know, we're an NBA podcast too, David. The Suns won the bubble regular season, David. Who do you think is going to win the whole thing? Who wins the playoffs?
Oh, someone asked me this the other day, and I really struggled because
it's hard.
There's so many variables. You know, some of the good teams aren't doing very well right now. You know, Toronto's basically the informed team of the East, and it's hard to pick them as the overall winner. I'm pretty sure I said it at the start of the season, and I'm still going to roll with it. I think the Clippers, there's just, you know, Montrez is back for the first game of the playoffs, I believe. Lou Williams is back after his little misdemeanor. I just think Kawhi always goes to another level, and Paul George, it's about time that he stepped up in some big moments. So I'm still riding the Clippers. What's your guess?
We will end on yet another thing we agree on, David.
Love it.
The only thing I'll add to everything you said, which is all correct, is that Kawhi and Paul George both look pretty damn good in the bubble.
Yep.
They both look ready to go, so I totally agree with you. But normally here's where I do the sign off, all the other stuff, but we don't really have a lot anymore.
Hold on, I got one more question for you too.
Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot one first. Yeah, go ahead.
Mikal Bridges going to third season as well and has played all 155 of his games so far. Assuming the Suns extend him before restricted free agency, and I know salaries and stuff are a little bit all over the place at the moment, so I won't hold you to it, but what would you be prepared to give him as a 4-year extension, Max?
Oh my God, wow. And this so we're assuming it's right now, or what I expect him to be like when he's ready for his extension?
When he's ready, so a year from now, basically.
I think he's going to be making upwards of 20. I don't know how far upwards. I think 20 is probably the baseline for him, the way he's looking. And if he gets to where I think he can be offensively, it's going to be near max.
Yep, and I think what you alluded to somewhere in this podcast around the conversation getting interesting with him and DeAndre Ayton at some point, when they both are due for their extensions, that's when it's going to get real interesting, Max.
That's a great thing. Like, how often have teams had two guys come out at the same time who might both merit max extensions?
It's a tough thing to do. Philly's seeing it. They never had it at the same time, but they're certainly seeing, if it doesn't go quite to plan, how it can look like a disaster.
Well, that's a kind of a fun way to end the podcast. But anyway, yeah, so I think we did pretty well there, David. The only thing that was wrong is I cut off a 7 seconds or less question. It's never happened before.
Yep, it was a
rusty.
And I'm looking at the time codes. You'd think, we had this down to a fine art after, I believe this is officially our 79th episode. We're right at that 1.5 hour mark, which we, without even planning to, just seem to land on almost every single time, Max.
It's really funny. And then we also had my dog interrupt just now.
Love it.
Which is another staple of the podcast. So it was fun. Hey, I hope everyone enjoyed this. Again, we're not coming back for the podcast, but I'm sure we'll probably do this again sometime. We can't really help but talking basketball with each other.
Yep, it's the main reason we started it, and I'm really glad that we could jump on and if you skip the intro, Suns fans, at the start, I'd go back because there's a little nugget in there and also one in the outro that's about to come up. So thanks for listening and thanks for all your support. And thanks to you, Max. It was just so much fun to be able to jump back on and talk about the Suns with you.
It really was. Thank you, David, and thank you for starting your newsletter again. I know me, everybody else who are Suns fans, we appreciate it. It's the best thing going.
Thanks, Max.
Ha 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 ha!